I heard the creepy whispers of a child that vanished while I was babysitting. I never should have opened that door. The night I took that job, everything felt normal. A quiet house, a sleeping baby, and a simple plan. I settled into the living room, the hum of the TV filling the space, but something didn't feel right. The air was heavy, cold. Each breath sent a shiver through me. The shadows loomed longer than they should have. They stretched across the walls, twisting and curling like fingers reaching for something I couldn't see. I tried to shake it off. I wrapped my arms around my knees, but dread gnawed at the edges of my mind. Then came the whispers, high-pitched and broken, echoing from somewhere deep within the house. Help me, my heart raced. I glanced at the baby monitor, its green light blinking on and off, as if it were trying to communicate something urgent. Stop it. It's just your imagination, I whispered to myself, but the whispers grew louder, like a child trapped in a nightmare. They melted into the walls, seeping into the air, freezing my blood. I could still hear the soft coos of the baby, but the cruel contrast made my stomach drop. I rose, my legs trembling. I followed the sound. Down the dim hallway, every step echoed. The house creaked, breathing with me. It smelled like damp earth and stale memories. I hesitated at the door at the end, its surface marred by scratches, deep and unsettling. Could that be where the whispers were coming from? The whispers turned into faint cries, growing more insistent. Help me, the chill wrapped tight around my spine. My breath caught in my throat. I placed my hand on the doorknob, the cold metal biting into my palm. Just a quick look, I promised myself. A thrill of dread rushed through me, but I turned the knob anyway. It creaked open, revealing darkness beyond. I peered inside, heart pounding, waiting for my eyes to adjust. Nothing but shadows. And then a flicker of movement in the corner. I squinted, my body frozen. The cries echoed again, clearer now, twisting around my head. Help me. In an instant I slammed the door shut. My heart raced louder than the whispers. The room felt suffocating. Was it my imagination? Or was there really something there? Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows as if the house itself protested my stupidity. But that voice, I couldn't shake it. A loud crash from within the room made me jump. I gasped and stepped back. My chest ached. Everything in me screamed to run, but fear glued my feet to the floor. Before I could turn, the door sprang open again. There she stood. A small figure, shadows clinging to her like a shroud. I felt the world blur around me, my breath hitching. My scream lodged deep in my throat, trapped like a caged animal. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stumbled back, adrenaline surging through my veins, threatening to drown me in panic. The figure before me, a small girl with wild, tangled hair, stood in the doorframe, her face obscured by shadows. I braced myself against the wall, my breathing ragged as I tried to make sense of the horror. Help me, she said, her voice soft yet hauntingly hollow. I wanted to scream, to run, but her eyes, wide and pleading, held me captive. There was something unsettling about her gaze. It didn't belong to a child trapped in fear. It felt as though she was a vessel for something far more sinister lurking beneath her fragile exterior. Where are your parents? I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. The temperature in the hallway plummeted, the air thickening around us, suffocating and oppressive. The walls seemed to shiver, pulsating with an energy that made my skin crawl. Upstairs, she whispered, her voice cracking like dry leaves. They won't let me leave. Instinct told me to flee, but curiosity anchored me, binding me to that dark place. Who? I asked, my heart racing in sync with the creaking floorboards beneath my feet. Before she could answer, the lights flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. The whisper swelled in volume, and it felt as if the air itself was filled with tormented souls, clamoring for release. Look, she pointed behind me. I turned slowly, and my blood ran cold as I caught sight of the mirror on the wall. Reflected in its surface, The room warped and twisted, showing a far more chaotic scene than the one before me. I could see a glimpse of the attic, its door ajar, pale light spilling out and revealing figures moving eagerly just out of my reach. They were not alone. Shadowy masses swirled around them, elongated limbs stretching toward the light like hungry beasts that I whipped back to the girl, but she was no longer where she had been. My heart pounded as I felt the air shift, the weight of something unseen pressing down on me. Her voice echoed in the recesses of my mind, haunting me. "Help me find me." Panic surged anew as I noticed the chilling laughter of children echoing through the house. A cacophony of mirth twisted into something sinister. I turned toward the stairs, compelled to chase after the whispers of the girl who had vanished. "Stay with me," I called, but only the sound of my own despair met my ears. I sprinted down the hall, the walls shuddering as I made my way to the staircase. Each step felt like I was ascending into a ravenous maw, the laughter intensifying with every heartbeat. I paused at the bottom, glancing back at the oppressive shadows clinging to the corridor, and then steeled myself to forge ahead. The haphazard flicker of light did little to push back the darkness suffocating me. When I finally reached the upper landing, a chill swept through me, wrapping around my bones like a shroud of ice. The attic door swung wider now, inviting and malevolent, an open mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I could hear the faint rustle of fabric and the soft giggles of children echoing beyond. Would my decision lead to salvation or damnation? "Help me," the girl's voice cut through the din, sharper than glass and filled with an unmistakable urgency. With a racing heart I took a step forward, but the instant I did, the laughter morphed into a discordant chorus that clawed at my sanity. They weren't just playing, they were summoning. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening bang, leaving me in darkness. Panic exploded in my chest as an unnatural wind blew through the hallway, chilling every inch of me. The whispers grew to a fever pitch, drawing closer, twisting around my mind. I turned to run back the way I came, but the laughter grew louder, wrapping itself around me like a suffocating blanket. Before I reached the stairs, the shadows converged, swallowing the light. I staggered, the very air resisting me, as if the house itself had decided to keep its secrets buried. Then, out of the suffocating darkness, a hand shot out and grasped my wrist. "Help! Me!" it screamed, but the voice was not the girl's. It was deeper, tainted with a desperation that sent icy fingers of dread spiraling down my spine. I gasped, turning my head to see a familiar visage, twisted and angry. "He's here!" It beckoned, dragging me into the abyss of shadows as I screamed, the fear clenching my heart. The house tilted, and suddenly, the darkness became alive with thousands of eyes that knew exactly what awaited me. The eyes blinked in a malevolent rhythm, their glimmer weaving into a tapestry of dread that hung heavy in the air. Each pair flickered with a different level of understanding, the kind of knowing that made my breath hitch as terror clamped down around my throat. They glared at me from every corner, emerging from the deep recesses of the shadows, and I felt their collective hunger, their thirst for something I couldn't comprehend. I tried to yank my arm away, but the grip tightened around my wrist with an unnatural strength. The familiar face twisted in agony, its features eerily contorted, and I knew it was someone I once cared for, someone who had vanished into the folds of myth and memory. "You have to listen to me," it gasped, dragging me further into the darkness. Who are you?" Panic surged like a tidal wave, crashing over reason and drowning me in disbelief. "Help me," it echoed back, layers of pain drenching those two words. "You must go to the attic. Find the truth. But beware the Watcher." The darkness pulsated around me, and I couldn't decipher where this voice ended, and the shadows began. In that moment, the laughter of the children morphed into a chilling melody, taunting me with secrets long buried. "Find her," they sang, their voices intertwining with the pulsing shadows that wanted me to stay, to join them in their sinister dance. They handed me dread like a gift, opening the floodgates to horrors that resided in this house. With a determined shove, I broke free from the hand that clutched me. I stumbled backward, desperately trying to turn back, but the hallway behind was swallowed in an inky void, cutting me off from the exit, from the sanctuary of the mundane world beyond the walls. I felt a sudden, fierce gust that seemed to draw the shadows away, as if something had stepped just beyond the veil. Time warped around me. Every heartbeat felt simultaneously fleeting and eternal as I felt drawn to the attic once again. Compelled to answer the beckoning cries. "Who's the Watcher?" I shouted into the dark, hoping for guidance amid chaos. Something lurks above, the familiar visage wailed, voice fading into the whispers of the shadows. It knows you're here. Without another breath, I turned and raced toward the staircase. Adrenaline ignited my limbs, propelling me forward. The shadows pulsed like a living entity, casting horrifying shapes against the walls, and each step echoed with the distant sound of scratching, like claws raking against wood. At last I reached the attic door, my heart hammering in my chest. Cold dread washed over me, yet my resolve hardened. I swung the door open, expecting to reveal a sanctuary. Instead, a maelstrom of swirling darkness greeted me. The attic was a chaotic platform of broken furniture and old memories, but it was something else that caught my eye, a small box pulsing with a soft, pheromone-like glow beneath a blanket of dust. I took a hesitant step inside, and the door slammed shut behind me with a violent crash. The laughter of the children surged, enveloping me, filling the space with foreboding anticipation. I turned to leave, but the attic was not just a room. It breathed, and its breath was suffused with tragedy. "Open it!" A chorus of voices cried, echoing with urgency. Before I could process their demand, the box flew open, spilling forth a blinding white light that converged into a singular point. The laughter died to a hush, leaving an oppressive silence that made the hair on my arms stand at attention. As I reached a trembling hand toward the radiant core, memories began to flood the dim corners of my mind, fractured images of the girl, her twisted smile, the anguish in her eyes. I saw glimpses of darkness, a monstrous shape looming above her, its eyes glistening like daggers in the night. Just then, a voice as smooth as silk brushed against my ear, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You shouldn't have come here." The glow flickered and began to darken. I recoiled, trembling, but the shadows converged once more, swallowing the light and revealing a figure that towered above me, its features obscured by a dense veil of night. "No!" I screamed, scrambling backward, but the edge of the attic came to meet my fall. The figure leaned down, inching closer until we were face to face. "I am the Watcher," it hissed, breath cold against my skin, "and you have awakened that which should remain dormant." The box lay abandoned, its glow giving way to a sinister blackness, and in that moment, I understood the truth that I was not alone, and the house was alive, hungering for another to feed it. Just as I felt the ground give way beneath me, I glimpsed the attic door behind me, now a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth. The last whisper of all the children echoed in my ear. "Help us!" And then I fell into the darkness, knowing all hope had vanished into the endless night. As I plummeted into the void, the sensation of falling morphed into something grotesquely still, an absence of sound that felt almost suffocating. My stomach churned as I braced for impact, yet the ground never met me. Instead, I was suspended in an endless, oppressive darkness where time ceased to exist. I am that isolation. A whisper coiled around my consciousness, creeping into the periphery of my awareness. "You should not have awakened him," it lamented, a spectral echo that curled through the air like smoke. My heartbeat quickened, thrumming against the silence like an agonized drum, resonating with the fear beginning to unfurl inside me. I felt cold fingers tugging at the edges of my mind, twisting memories and fabric of reality. Thoughts flickered in and out of focus. The girl's face danced before me, illuminated by the faint glow of childhood dreams turned sinister. With each fleeting image, the whispers grew more intense, a thousand voices drowning me in their mournful cries, urging me to listen, but to what end? "Help us! Help us!" The children's chorus persisted, a harrowing plea that chipped at the brittle shell of my sanity. "We're trapped, just like you." Suddenly, the darkness began to pulsate, the shadows shifting and swirling, and for the first time since my fall, I felt the ground beneath me solidify. I stumbled, finding myself standing once more not in the familiar attic, but in a vast, dimly lit expanse that stretched out like a gaping wound. Cracked floorboards creaked beneath my weight, and the air was thick with dust, old secrets clawing at my throat. "What is this place?" I gasped, feeling an invisible barrier pressing against my body, a suffocating embrace that stifled any remaining flicker of hope. "Home," the whispers replied, reverberating off the walls. "This is where the lost gather. This is where they feed." A chill shot down my spine as I took a hesitant step forward. The atmosphere thickened, tangibly heavy with despair, and I could see them, huddled figures emerging from the shadows, children of varying ages, their faces pale and sunken. Their eyes each held a darkness that mirrored the cruel void stretching behind them. Why are you here?" I stuttered, my voice trembling as their haunting gazes bore into me. "Bound to this place, until another is found," one of them replied. A girl with matted hair and a hollow smile that twisted my heart. "You opened the box and the watcher was released. Now we must wait." "Wait for what?" I pressed, panic tightening my chest as I realized I was surrounded by ghostly forms, mired in the remnants of their lives, to be taken. Another voice whispered, a husky, sorrowful sound that seemed to seep into every corner of the room. "He cannot awaken without a toll." A sense of understanding pulsed within me, a terrible revelation that struck me like a blade. The Watcher, the monstrous figure, demanded a sacrifice, a new vessel to sate his insatiable hunger. My stomach dropped, and utterly helpless, I glanced toward the shadows, half expecting to see it loom over us. Suddenly, I heard a rustling from behind one of the spectral children. "Don't look!" one of them shrieked, echoing through the emptiness. "He sees you." "He knows," but it was too late. I had stolen a glance into the darkness, and there two glistening eyes watched me from the gloom, a sinister smirk cutting across what resembled a gaping maw. The room warped as it twitched, alive with anticipation, eager to extract its payment, and that moment, the laughter of the children returned, an agonized symphony that entwined with the shadows, spinning a web of despair that pulled me into its grasp. The hairs on the back of my neck bristled, every instinct screaming to flee, but there was nowhere to go. I was bound to them, caught between the guardian of dark secrets and the lost souls who sought my commiseration. Just when I thought my heart would stop from the weight of their despair, the figure lunged from the shadows, an elongated hand reaching toward me, fingers curling with predatory intention. "Now you will join us," it hissed, teeth glinting with malevolence. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me shifted once more, plunging into a deeper abyss, and as I fell into the silence, I could hear their cries melding with the laughter, the last remnants of my will slipping through my fingers. "Help us!" they cried, just before the darkness swallowed the room whole. The last thought that crossed my mind, before plunging into the impenetrable black, was not of escape, but of an unfathomable truth. I had become the summoner of nightmares, and now I was forever tethered to their unfinished screams. With a horrifying realization, I felt the Watcher watch me as I fell, both a savior and a condemned soul in a quest that would never end. As I plummeted into that endless void, my senses sharpened with each fleeting heartbeat, desperation igniting a wild fire within me. The whispers morphed into a chaotic cacophony around me, a chorus of voices bound together by some dark fate, stretching the very fabric of sanity. My pulse raced with fear, each new cry piercing through the layers of bleakness that swirled around me. Echoes of laughter, screams softened into sobs, and then silence. Then, with an abruptness that stole my breath, I landed not on ground, but on a coarse surface that felt like sandpaper against my skin. I lay still, gasping, as the pungent scent of charred earth filled my nostrils. Slowly, blinking against the oppressive darkness, I took in my surroundings. The dim light disclosed shapes that lurked in the reeking shadows, draped in torn fabric that fluttered like dying leaves. With trembling hands, I pushed myself up, and the shadows recoiled momentarily, revealing their shapes in clearer strokes. Insects with too many legs skittering across the ground, phantoms formed from misplaced memories hovering in and out of view. A shout rose in my throat, yet it fragmented and fell away, drowned by the unsettling hum that vibrated through the ground. Help us, the chorus resurfaced, now more urgent, insistent, seeping into my bones as if the very whispers were woven into my flesh. I turned instinctively, the darkness thickening as if alive, fueled by my fear. The children surrounded me again, their hollow eyes glinting like polished stones, glimmers of life extinguished long ago. Each face mirrored the anguish of a trapped soul, and every gaze carried something worse than despair, because in their eyes, I saw the Watcher reflected, lurking just beneath their brittle skin. "Please," I whimpered, "how do I escape? What must I do?" Tangled silence answered, but one of the children crept closer. The girl with the matted hair bore a crooked smile that revealed far too many teeth. "There is no escape," she rasped, each word a drip of honey mixed with poison. "We cannot leave unless he is satiated. You can't deny what you released." The chilling laughter echoed, faint but compelling, spiraling inward until it engulfed me with a profound sense of dread. "You are the sacrifice," she continued, and the refrain of the other children followed, a mournful, hypnotic chant that wrapped tightly around my neck. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. I stumbled backward, each step bringing me closer to the edge of an unseen precipice. Within that dreadful chant, an underlying rhythm surfaced. With each repetition, I felt the Watcher's presence shift from shadow to substance, a tangible tension that curled around me like serpents, thick and choking. I could hear it now, breath low and rhythmic, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to know. It reverberated through the depths of the abyss, resonating with every flicker of fear. The figure in the distance began to coalesce into shape, elongated limbs draped with veils of velvety darkness, a face only half revealed, obscured by a familiar yet unnerving grin that stretched too wide. Soon, it said, its voice the echo of an old man and the gurgle of a child combined. Soon, my dear. I raised my shaking hands defensively, feeling the weight of the ether shift around me, a mere breeze turning into a gale-force wind, pushing against my body. The children vanished, their faces fading into the void with each blink of my eye, leaving only the heavy, pulsating presence of the Watcher before me. Join them, it crooned, a serpent curling around a helpless lamb, drawing me closer to the brink. I turned to flee, my heart compressing in my chest as I stumbled across shifting earth, desperately searching for any glimmer of hope. My feet skidded, yet the ground felt soft like marsh. I lunged forward, hands reaching for anything to grasp this grim reality. Suddenly, a terrible scream erupted from behind me, echoing through the desolate expanse. I pivoted in horror, my heart racing, to see a chilled boy with wide, haunted eyes fighting against invisible chains, tethering him to the shadowed depths. "Help me!" he shrieked, his voice the last scream of innocence, resonating with emptiness. "Help me!" But before he could finish, the Watcher surged forward, devouring him in a snap of its maw, a flourish of mist and darkness swallowing the last remnants of his plea. Gasping, I stumbled backward, my breath escaping in frantic bursts as I caught sight of the growing shadows at my feet, filled with squirming figures. They writhed and twisted into grotesque shapes, turning their longing, hollow eyes to meet mine, their fingers outstretched. And just then the ground began to rumble, a low growl that echoed like thunder, as if the very earth sensed the awakening of the Watcher. The walls of darkness pulsed violently around me, shrieking to life as the shadows swirled in a frenzy, a maelstrom of hungry longing. Caught in the horrifying reality, I felt the firm grip of arms pulling me down into the tentacles of the abyss. "No!" I screamed, but the frenzy heightened, a cacophony of laughter, cries and despair ensnared me. The last thing I registered before being dragged under was the echo of the children's voices melding with the Watcher's sinister laughter. "Welcome home." And then all fell silent, leaving only the deep, echoing heartbeat of a world that would never let me go. As I descended, engulfed by darkness that seemed to consume my very essence, a sickening sense of surrender washed over me. It felt as though a cold tide was pulling me beneath the surface, whose depths whispered secrets in a language I was yet too terrified to decipher. The last flickers of the outside world faded, replaced by the shaken memories of those vacant eyes watching from the shadows. When my vision adjusted, I found myself in a chamber lined with scars of the past. Stone walls soaked in shadow held the remnants of something vile. Flickering flames on ancient braziers cast wavering shadows that danced in the corners of my vision, teasing the very edge of my sanity. "Help us!" a whisper beckoned once more, threading through the stale air, curling around my mind like a serpent coiling its prey. It was no longer a group of children. Now I understood the voice belonged to Oni, girl who seemed older and wiser than the rest, her visage marked by an intimidating blend of sorrow and wickedness. "That I have waited," she said, stepping forward. Her face, highlighted by the flickering light, bore the scars of suffering. Her eyes, ancient pools reflecting centuries of despair. "I thought you would never come." "Who? What are you?" I stammered, my throat painfully dry. Every word was a plunge into the icy depths of dread. "Your release," she murmured, each syllable dripping with a sinister sweetness. "You shall be the one to speak his name." Her statement hung heavy in the air, pulling my gaze downward to the grotesque carvings into the stone floor. They depicted twisted forms caught in an endless cycle of horror that mirrored the very children I had seen above ground, perhaps once part of this unwilling congregation, now lost in the void of their fate. "Speak it," she urged again, her voice rising, gaining a harsh edge. "His name must echo through this chamber. He cannot be sated until you give him the power." No, I cried, recoiling from her insinuation. My heart raced, pounding like the wings of a caged bird. I won't do it. There is no choice, she hissed, her face twisting into a malevolent grin that chilled my bones. You are bound to him now, just as we are. His hunger is a part of you, clawing at your soul. You will only find salvation through the sacrifice of another. As if on cue, the chamber began to pulse ominously, the walls vibrating in sync with the unnatural heartbeat reverberating from below. Warm air pressed against my skin, thick with a smell reminiscent of decay and anguish. Shadows flickered along the stone, growing in length until they melded into shapes that pointed accusingly at me. No. I refuse. I shouted defiantly, but my voice quivered, betraying the dread coiling in my stomach. In retaliation, the girl stepped back, and the darkness behind her began swirling with intent. The air thickened and I staggered, grasping my head as an unbearable weight pressed against my temples, filling my mind with haunting echoes of laughter, each one sharp and cruel. You release him and in turn you can set us all free. Free? You mean to feed him? I yelled, yet the shadows resonated with glee, their low growls filling the space between breaths. Free. Release. Feed. They chanted, a tidal wave of hostility blending with reckless joy. Suddenly I felt an icy draft sweep through the chamber, pulling at my clothes, whispering ancient secrets that grasped my resolve. In that very moment I sensed Ida shift, a presence looming just beyond the edge of my vision. The shadows congealed, coalescing into a singular form that was impossibly vast and incalculably ancient. I found myself rooted to the spot as it beckoned, tendrils of darkness weaving around my ankles, pinning me in place. Whatever this thing was, its significance threatened to engulf my very identity. Join us, it murmured, pulling closer, its gaze fiery and indescribable, burning through the darkness. Give me what I seek, and I will show you eternity. I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes, blurring the grotesque scene. I can't, I sobbed, desperately surveying the chamber for an escape, but the shadows tangibly tightened around me, their grip refusing to relent. Then you will become like the rest, another soul for the sacrifice, the girl sang sweetly, a lullaby dipped in malice. The shadows quivered and twisted, entwining around me, and with that, I glimpsed the walls beginning to shift, outlining the faces of the very children I'd seen before, shining with that same harrowing pleading beneath layers of ash and despair. I could almost hear their unspoken words carried through the abyss. It was clear I was running out of time. And then in the inky dark, a soft gasp echoed in the emptiness, a voice I recognized too well. Help me! Rigidity shot through me and I spun towards the sound, a dread seeping through my veins. It was a child's voice, but not just any child. It was Margaret, the bubbly girl I was babysitting before all of this descended upon me. Margaret! I screamed, urgency clawing at my throat, but the shadows surged, and the watchers moved closer, closing in on me and her. Help or lose her, the abyss hissed, and in that horrifying moment, I felt the weight of a harrowing choice crash down upon me. The chamber rumbled like the wrath of a dark god, and just as I was about to move, a piercing scream ripped through the air. Help me! Please! And it surged, whispers rising into a fever-pitch chorus screaming for release. My heart thundered as shadows closed in tighter, leaving me frozen in an unending choice. To sacrifice one soul to save another, to unleash unspeakable evil for my own salvation, or to be dragged down into the darkness alongside all the others. Choose. The creature roared, filling the chamber with a clamoring rhythmic beat of dread. And then it happened. The ground beneath me began to crack and split, the darkness swirling and reaching for both of us. Help! Margaret's voice shrieked one last time. Then it all fell silent. I stood at the precipice, desperation overriding my very being, teetering on the edge of a decision that would haunt me for all eternity. The darkness beckoned, yearning with a sinister promise that echoed deep in my soul. And then a stunning realization: if I did nothing, it would take us both. One choice. One moment. And I was running out of time. As the ground split beneath me, I felt the pulse of the darkness gather strength, rippling like water disturbed by a falling stone. The glowing ember of hope that had fueled my heart flickered dangerously, overshadowed by dread and an overwhelming urge to flee from the sinister shadows encroaching upon me. But in the depths of that despair, Margaret's cries thundered through my mind, demanding attention, demanding action. Choose. The creature bellowed again, its voice churning the air like a storm. I felt the whispers weaving through my thoughts, mocking my hesitation, whispering sweet temptations that promise freedom from the pain, from the haunting truths embedding themselves within my soul. And yet, the child's innocent pleas echoed louder, the titanic pull of her fear, raw and unfiltered, igniting the flickering flame of courage still smoldering in the wreckage of my heart. "Margaret, I'm coming!" I screamed into the abyss, a declaration that felt both like a battle cry and a last desperate prayer. Yet, even as the words left my mouth, they hung in the air, swallowed by the darkness surrounding me. The girl with the sorrowful, twisted smile stepped closer. "You think you can save her?" she taunted, her voice dripping with malfeasance. "You are as powerless as the children once were, just another soul waiting to be consumed." But as her words cascaded over me, another piece of the chamber's malevolent tapestry began to unravel, an old sense of the others, the specters that had begged me to release them. They began to writhe in agony, their voices merging into a cacophony of cries for help, each one resonating with the pain of betrayal and despair. "Do you hear them?" I gasped, tears stinging my eyes. "They're trapped just like you." "No," she hissed, rage awakening in her gaze, twisting her features into a grotesque mask of fury. "They chose to be here. They all chose just like you. The bound always choose. Then I will choose differently," I shouted defiantly, the shadows recoiling slightly, as if my resolution had carved a fissure in their dark energy. I turned my focus inward, gathering all the love I felt for that innocent girl, channeling it into an enduring strength. "I refuse to join you," I yelled, splaying my arms wide against the darkness that gripped me. "I choose to fight for her." As if provoked by my defiance, the shadows surged violently. The chamber shuddered, the walls seeming to breathe with desperate hunger, filling with the faces of the lost who stared at me with pleading eyes. They needed release, but so did I. Somehow I could summon the courage that fate had denied them. "Margaret!" I bellowed, searching frantically for any sign of her amid the chaos. "Stay with me!" The echoes twisted into a sinister laughter, reverberating against stone, blending into the sound of shattering glass. I turned, spins of darkness erupted around me, trailing back to tiny bodies forming from the very shadows themselves. Specters of children began to manifest, flickers of their past surfacing in moments like fleeting ghosts frozen in time. But these didn't seem to provide hope, they were threatening. "Feed us!" they chanted in unison, their voices shrill yet childlike, blending into the overwhelming roar. "Release us! Your powers won't work against us," the girl hissed. "Surrender to the darkness. It is the only way." "I won't submit," I growled, tightening my fists, summoning the embers of resilience that had ignited within me. "I will find her." With a leap, I plunged into the vortex, forcing my way through the swirling shadows as they lashed out, tending to consume me whole. I could feel Margaret's desperate presence slipping through my fingertips, tantalizingly close yet further with every passing second. My heart raced. Then, suddenly, I could see a flash of golden hair glinting in a smear of light that flickered invitingly at the edge of the overwhelming dark. She was trapped against the wall of the chamber, the tendrils of shadows gripping her tiny form in a vice of despair. "Don't you dare let her go," I demanded of the shadows, forcing my way through the tightening grip, my body trembling with the effort. "Join us!" they screamed, the echoes reaching fever pitch, now a thunderous orchestra that drowned all rational thought. Every face of the children merged into a collective maw of horror, threatening to swallow me, taunting my very existence as I continued to push forward. "Margaret!" I cried at the top of my lungs, finally breaking near the edge of the grasping abyss. She looked at me, her love-filled eyes wide with terror, yet her small mouth broke into a glimmer of a smile. "Help me!" she whimpered, and then the shadows snaked even tighter, pulling her further away. "Don't let go!" I roared, grasping her wrist just as darkness surged to take her completely. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, sensing the combined rage of the shadows all pooled at my proximity, faster and faster coursing through my veins as I struggled against their monstrous grip, and just then, I felt a violent rupture of connection that sent shockwaves rippling through us both. The abyss held a cold promise, a beckoning call to surrender, a chance to join them in their gloom, to surrender all hope. But I was not ready to let go. Infusing my body with every ounce of strength I possessed, I focused not just on Margaret, but on defeating the monstrous presence that had ensnared us both. And then I heard it. A low growl slicing through the noise, echoing deep from the darkness. Give in or lose everything. With one last desperate effort, I shouted her name again, my voice shaking the fabric of the chamber. Margaret! There was a sudden stillness. Everything fell silent, empty silence, heavy with the promise of dread before the whispers crescendoed into a wild, chaotic fury around me, and then I felt its shadows tearing into my chest, clawed hands reaching for my heart, ready to consume what little hope remained. But still, some distant echo filled my mind, the child's laughter, the vibrant memories of innocent joy, a way to break the spell hanging thick in the air. Margaret! I screamed once more, clinging on with all my might, but instead of the familiar warmth of her small hand, I felt nothing but the creeping cold settling into my bones. Suddenly, I saw her figure dissolve, the light fading, while the shadows began to swirl tighter and tighter around me until I could no longer move, until there was nothing left but the relentless grip of darkness embodying all I had feared. And just as it dragged me into the depths of the void, a final thought sent an electrifying shock of horror through me. If what I feared most wasn't that I wouldn't find her, but that she would become one of them? Without warning, a blinding flash erupted in the darkness, tearing the fabric of the abyss and illuminating a grotesque realization just before total submersion. Leave her! Came a voice too familiar, rising from within the shadows, sending shockwaves of terror cascading through my spine. It was my own voice, echoing back at me, distorted and dark, and in that moment, I felt the searing warmth of possession ignite deep within, as everything slipped away. No! I screamed, and then darkness consumed me whole. The silence was deafening as I hung suspended in the void, a soul caught in a purgatory of my own making. Memories of Margaret flashed behind my eyes, her laughter ringing like a chime in the air, the way she twirled in her little dress, her face beaming with innocence. I clung to those images as tightly as I had clung to her little wrist, as though they could pull me back from the brink of that endless darkness. But then, from the churning shadows ahead, the sinister laughter returned. It crawled over my skin like 1,000 tiny spiders. You think you can save her? It mocked, reverberating in the endless void, crescendoing as if it was the very breath of the darkness itself. She belongs to us now, just like you will. Panic set in, a visceral chill that wrapped around my heart. Am not one of you, I cried desperately, sensation surging through me like electric fire. Am her protector. Her protector. The shadows contorted into shapes that twisted and writhed, morphing through grotesque visions of children with empty eyes and skin stretched tight over brittle bones. They moved in sync with the whispers, their voices a symphony of sorrow and malevolence that reverberated through the abyss. Playtime has already begun, and you've chosen the wrong side. Suddenly, a new sound shattered the acoustic infant's wail bursting forth from the shadows, shrill and piercing. My heart thudded painfully at the familiarity. Margaret, is that you? I shouted into the void, my voice breaking, but the cries grew quieter, fading along with the memory of her warmth, replaced by a single resonating truth that nestled deep within my ribcage. She was no longer simply the child I had watched over, she was becoming something else entirely. The shadows twisted, coiling around each flickering image of her innocence until each was marred by a skeletal grin that chilled my very soul. The realization was like ice water in my veins. No, I won't let them take you, I screamed, thrusting my will against the cold grasp of despair. You are stronger than this, Margaret. You can fight. Once again, silence wrapped its arms around me, and for a moment, I thought I could sense her fragile spark, a flicker of the child she had once been. It pulsed in the darkness, faint but vibrant. It connected us even through the separation. The shadows squirmed and shrieked, distressed at the sight of that flicker. They lunged at me, reaching with clawed fingers through the abyss, desperate to pull me down into their whirlpool of despair. I could feel their icy breath brushing against my skin, the malicious intent weaving through me like smoke. With all my might, I chose to remember her laughter, her dreams, her joy unfurling like petals in a garden. Margaret! I called again, drawing strength from the faint hope that she could somehow still hear me. In this darkness, remember who you are. That sorrowful, twisted smile flickered across the faces of the gathered shadows, mocking me, yet I pressed on. You were brave and you are loved. Don't let the darkness erase you. Each pulse of my words reverberated outward, and for one precious moment, I felt the walls of despair shudder. Not her, not like us. The darkness hissed, recoiling against the force of my resolve. The moments that followed were agonizing, the realm around me trembling from the impact. I felt that warmth return, gradually filling the cold chasm that had opened in my chest. Then, briefly, I saw Margaret's face emerging from the swirl of shadow, her expression faltering between fear and longing. "No, please don't leave me," her small voice trembled, and I lunged toward her, grasping at the tightening bond that flared between us. Suddenly, the darkness recoiled as if I had struck it. "You can't have her," came a feeble wail from the void, but I pressed forward, desperate to bridge the gap, my heart pounding in sync with her fragile flicker of light. A surge of energy raced through me as I surged forward into the storm, but before I could grasp Margaret's outstretched hand, the darkness thickened, sucking the warmth from our connection. I felt Ida, predatory hunger stirring to life, unfurling like a serpent poised to strike, and in an instant, everything lurched. The abyss twisted violently around me, and I was thrown back tumbling through an endless gulf of black, separated from her. The cries of the shadows pulsed violently through my mind, a thousand voices torn between rage and despair. "It's too late. She belongs to us." A spine-chilling epiphany cut deep into my thoughts. If I could not reach her, then she was destined to become one of them. In that moment of weightless terror, I felt her dissolve from my grasp, the glowing ember of her essence pulled deeper into the maw of darkness. Desperation clawed at my insides as I flailed against the suffocating weight of trepidation. And then, just as I feared I would be lost to the void forever, a whisper made its way through the howling chaos, tender yet chilling. "You'll never escape." The shadows drew nearer, revealing a monstrous silhouette lurking behind an ever-thickening curtain of black, monstrous eyes glinting with malicious intent. "Whose choice is it now?" The echo of my own voice taunted deeper, swirling around me, mocking and insidious. Then, from the very heart of that darkness, a shape began to form, rising slowly with an unholy elegance, drawing my gaze away from the emptiness. It was a figure, pale and twisted, a mockery of innocence bearing Margaret's shimmering features but trapped in a nightmarish visage, eyes too wide, mouth parched in a grotesque smile. "Margaret?" I whispered, the name clawing its way from my throat as horror gripped me utterly. She tilted her head. "Me sweet, dear Margaret," only it was not her any longer. As it grinned at me through the shadows, I could finally feel the ice hardening in my chest. It wasn't just the shadows draining her. They had taken everything that made her my own, and in that moment of realization, I could barely breathe, understanding that the true horror unfolding was not merely the darkness imposing itself but the very real possibility that she had already chosen her fate. In the storm of heart-wrenching agony and terror, my wavering voice barely reached her ears. "Margaret, please." The smile widened, devoid of love and laced with malice, as my own voice echoed around us, distorted and cruel. "Margaret will be ours." With a final jolt of desperate resolve, I screamed into the encroaching abyss, knowing that this battle was far from over. But did the love I possessed mean anything in the end? Or had the darkness already claimed her forever? As hope faded, I felt the unbearable weight crush in like a tomb, and one thought remained. I had to escape before Margaret fully slipped into their clutches and vanished into the silence forever. But how could I fight the shadows when they were now intertwined with the very fabric of my own soul? With dread pooling in my gut, I realized I might be far too late, and then I saw the figure behind me, a form shrouded in shadow, eyes glistening with an unsettling familiarity, ready to lift the veil and reveal the utmost horror waiting in the dimension between light and darkness. The atmosphere thickened, electric with a malevolence that licked at my skin, and the shadows swirled, forming grotesque faces that snarled and shrieked, each one a mournful echo of a child lost within the folds of the void. My heart raced as I turned, fear gripping me. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but escape was a notion growing fainter with each passing breath. "Margaret!" I cried out anew, my voice rendered desperate and thin as it cut through the growing din. Yet, the shadows' laugh turned jagged smiles toward me as contesting whispers cascaded like torrents. Their words twisted seamlessly, spewing forth the dark desires which had crept into their hollow cores. "You're too late, protector. She is ours now." I felt them inch closer, amid their blighted laughter that coiled like smoke, each sound darkly melodic but replete with despair. They encircled me, urging me to lose myself in their dismal cadence, dragging me into the recesses of my mind where memories twisted and spiraled, tainted by their insidious grip. "Oh, you remember the last time you saw her? rasped a voice from my periphery, familiar yet corrupted, trailing dusk like a creeping shadow. The figure stood on the brink of my consciousness, a dark silhouette robed in despair's embrace. It wore Margaret's essence like a second skin, its form shifting and trembling, as if woven from fragments of forgotten dreams. I trembled from its proximity, the dread enfolding me, binding my limbs as though they were lead. No. Get away from her, I shouted, but the force of my defiance only incited their malicious delight. Yet somewhere behind the veil of their disingenuous lament I felt a pulse of warmth, a flicker of hope igniting beyond their grasp, an undercurrent of memory that transcended the shadows. Suddenly a blinding light surged through the abyss, radiating directly from where I last glimpsed Margaret's silhouette. It burst like sunlight breaking over dark clouds, piercing the suffocating blanket of dismay that threatened to consume me whole. The voices wailed in fury at its intrusion, disintegrating their illusions, their ravenous hunger momentarily halted by the sheer force of that light. That I seized the moment, heart racing as I anchored myself in that radiant warmth. Margaret! I can see you! Fight! I called into the chaos, pushing my resolve into the gleaming brightness, channeling every shred of love and determination that still coursed through me. In a brief window of clarity, I saw her eyes, vivid pools of innocence, flickering like candle flames caught in a gale. I'm scared, she cried, and although my heart soared at hearing her voice, the terror that it contained splintered me further. Hold on to me. I'm coming, I screamed, my feet planting firmly in the churning tumult of shadows threatening to crush me. With every ounce of will I could muster, I dashed toward the light, weaving through the darkness that clutched at my ankles like skeletal fingers, intent on dragging me back into their morass. The twisted figure behind me roared, yearning to pull me back into its midnight embrace. You can't save her. Not when she willingly stepped into the abyss. You'll join her soon enough. Its words turned to chilling whispers, taunting me as it lunged, its long fingers stretching shoulder-width apart. Desperate for a taste of my fear, that I forced myself to glance over my shoulder, and the sight was enough to halt my breath. The darkness pulsed with an iridescent energy, swirling and darting, and from its center, I could see the gaping maw of gluttonous nightmares widening while the very essence of Margaret flickered within, disheveled and yearning. Margaret! I cried once more, my tears mingling with the frantic desperation coursing through me. But just as the warmth reached my fingertips, as I neared that sanctuary of light, the laughter erupted anew, an infernal symphony harmonizing in malevolence. You think you can take her? Think again. The shadows converged, forming a pulsating wall of despair that loomed taller, thick, prepared to erase every trace of light that I clung to. I pressed on, the ground beneath me shifting and heaving as the darkness fought back, determined to swallow my resolve whole. You are nothing but a mere coward, hiding behind false hope, hissed a voice that I recognized all too well, the echoes of my own self-doubt reinforcing their dominion over me. But even amongst the rising tide of fear, I felt something beginning to shift. Margaret's brilliance flickered brighter behind the veil of the darkness, a beacon unraveling the threads of despair that had been threatening to ensnare me. I believe in you, I yelled, emboldened by the very hope I fought so hard to protect. The shadows recoiled, howling in anguish as the light surged, nearly blinding in its brilliance. Dare I hope that it would be enough? Could it shatter their grips? Then suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the void, a bone-chilling roar splitting the air as the figure surged, its twisted face merging fully with that of my daughter, becoming a mirror reflecting my worst fears. You'll never take her from us, it shrieked, lunging at me with ragged claws gleaming like obsidian. I braced for impact, heart racing as terror crystallized within. Margaret! I shouted one last time, the name choking me, and then before I could fully comprehend what happened, a deafening crack split the heaviness around me, the equilibrium of the darkness shattering. In that fleeting moment, I felt an unbearable surge of forces collide. The cavernous void seemed to collapse in on itself, shadows writhing and howling as if caught in the throes of destruction. But from within, beneath the crush of darkened whispers, a faint voice emerged, unscathed, sweet and resounding, cutting through the disarray like a blade. Daddy! The shadows froze, their cacophony extinguished, and as my heart soared and shattered in tandem, a suffocating silence replaced the chaos, punctuated only by that whispered plea that clawed at the walls of reality. And then, the light collapsed, drowning the darkness in its righteous glow. But it was far more than just light. It was the essence of my very soul intertwining with hers, battling against the thonic pull of despair. But in that breathtaking moment of clarity, before I could grasp its power, the grip of shadows coiled tighter than ever, and as I felt Margaret's presence slipping once again, I realized in horror something even darker loomed just beyond that radiant light, something I hadn't anticipated, and its chilling eyes were fixed directly upon me. "Let's play," a new voice mocked, slithering through the air as the grotesque form materialized once more, staring back with a hunger that spelled doom. And that split second, the horrid truth settled. Where once I sought my daughter, now I too was being dragged toward an unnameable fate, and my journey through the darkness was only just beginning. I woke again, bathed in a shimmering ethereal glow that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. The world around me, once a twisted tableau of shadows and despair, now enveloped me in radiant light, pulsating like a heartbeat. Confused but resolute, I turned my head, my heart pounding as the memory of Margaret surged in the forefront of my mind. "Margaret!" I called, panic flaring as I scanned the bright expanse, seeking any trace of her. "Help me," a whisper echoed. Was it her voice? I could feel her presence, a tether pulling at my soul, and I followed it blindly. The light stretched ahead like a trail through untouched snow, guiding me toward the haunting call. Each step resonated with the nagging weight of despair that had lingered in the shadows. Then suddenly the brightness flickered, unresolved darkness creeping into the edges of my vision. As I moved deeper, I found myself compelled, suspended in time and space, a balance tipping dangerously between hope and the lurking specter of sorrow. There they were, the children, not bound by shadows now, but somehow still lost. Their smiles became vague specters, eyes emanating a dull light. "Join us," they beckoned, hands outstretched as if entrusting me with their hopelessness. "And oh," I shouted, grasping my head, fighting against the rising tide of dread. "Margaret needs me." But as I continued to run, the children's faces turned shadowed, swirling into grotesque masks reflecting the horrors I had seen before, faces of the lost, bearing the scars of unuttered promises and buried secrets. I turned back, instinctively fleeing the encroaching darkness, but my heart sank as I caught sight of what lay behind me, a cavernous maw creeping closer, depths shadows pulsing with insatiable hunger and threat. There I glimpsed the Watcher, its eyes gleaming maliciously, awaiting my surrender. "Let the light come, take your place with us," they shrieked, relentless, their laughter merging with the gleeful cries of the shadows. I felt the darkness tug at my clothes, a suffocating blanket threatening to suffocate my resolve. But I wouldn't submit. "Margaret!" I called again, my voice trembling, heart pulsing with determination. "I won't let you go. You're stronger than this." In the distance, I saw her Agawine, a flicker of golden hair illuminated in a soft glow, surrounded by reflections of every little moment we'd shared. Laughter rippled like waves as she spun around, her infectious joy sending a pulse through the radiant light around her. "Daddy!" she shouted, sweet and heartfelt, and my heart soared as I pushed toward her. "Help me find my way back." "Hang on," I shouted, pushing against the tide of despair, stretching my fingers toward her. The light began to pulse, a guiding beacon hanging in the distance, but the shadows roared in anger, narrowing the gap between us and oh. I screamed, my voice reverberating through the void. The children's faces warped in horror, revealing mouths stretching into gaping grins of distorted malice. The darkness lunged, and just as my fingers brushed the edge of Margaret's warmth, the shadows howled in dismay. I felt the flicker of her hand, grasping at my palm, and our fingers entwined in one decisive moment of clarity, but the instant our skin touched, it was as if a cannon was fired. A wave of energy radiated outward, fragments of light exploding as if imploding, the darkness threatening to steal her. The very fabric of existence trembled under the weight of our connection, fought against the shadows seeking to claim us. "We will be free," I gasped, feeling both fear and a spark of brave rebellion ignite within me. "Together!" The shadows convulsed, the Watcher shrieked, limbs stretching, lurching, grasping toward us, desperate. And then came the oppressive wedge of despair slamming into my chest. The depth of it clawed for my voice. "You must submit. You can't resist." But I could feel Margaret's resolve, bright and fierce against the dark tumult. "Don't let go," she urged, and it coursed through me. With every ounce of strength I had left, I shouted, "You're not alone. I will find you." Light erupted from our clasped hands, twisting time and space in a vibrant explosion that echoed through the edges of the darkness, banishing shadows and phantoms, knocking the watcher back. In one breath, I felt pain give way to an overwhelming warmth that enveloped us both. I would fight for her, for every moment lost beneath the oppression of fear. But then it came rising from the echoing depths, a sickening, twisted laughter that resonated against my will, harsh and jarring, pulling at the seams of this reality. You think you've won? That darkness has receded forever? And in an instant the shadows returned, more powerful than before. Like a storm crashing over a Sharia repugnant, overwhelming wave that drowned out hope. You belong to us now. It thundered. An all-consuming truth reached into my heart. In that very instant I realized I had invoked something far darker than I had imagined, my own compulsions, my own fears. Yet the flicker of light remained. Beneath it all, a spark still glimmered with whispers of hope. Margaret's laugh echoed, brushing against my soul like a soft breeze. But as my power intensified, flickers of memories began to unravel, twisted visions of childhood laughter bleeding into my mind. And suddenly I could see, oh so clearly, the moment I first lost her in the house. "Help me!" she cried, her voice echoing against the darkness, that last fleeting moment before I had opened the door, what lay behind blinding me to the truth. It was never the shadows. It was always the choice to look away. You are not just my protector. You must be my light. As realization struck, I grasped for the radiating pulse of warmth between us. I will be your light. I fervently spat back into the abyss, the words tearing through me. In that moment everything changed. The shadows shrieked, dissolving around us, their forms losing solidity as we stood resolute. The light trembled and surged with clarity, and combined, we released a force that pulsated outward, scattering the darkness like butterflies in a gale. And then, just as the darkness threatened to swallow my determination whole, I heard it, me voice, a whisper harmonizing, help me, in sweet harmony with Margaret's. But the moment surged past me as her presence engulfed the darkness around it. Both of us became light, twirling and singing, carving our way through every shadow, binding ourselves in an unbreakable tether, feeding on the joy we'd unearthed in our pasts. Each pang of isolation shattered with every moment shared, spurring forth a resonance that repelled the choking darkness. Until finally, the laughter of children melded into one crescendo, filling the void with light and reality until the vacuum imploded in on itself. And in that moment I was aware of everything and nothing all at once. But what struck me hardest as the shadows collapsed around us was not merely our escape. It was how their shadows still lingered, remnants of a dark truth woven into the fabric of reality. The warmth of Margaret faded momentarily as I looked back, and I felt that cold abyss even as hope glimmered. The darkness festered and seethed, lurking just behind the corners of light, waiting patient and hungry for its next moment to strike. We emerged once more, gasping for breath, but there behind us the lingering shadowed whispers continued to echo, weaving into the hollows of my mind. Help us, they echoed in unison as I turned to embrace Margaret, uncertainty swirling within me. And just as I looked into the depths of her eyes, I felt the malignant truth slip back into the recesses of my own heart. This would not be the end, for they are not lost, I whispered. And then I understood the haunting burden of that truth, that in the darkness that remained, we would always be tethered between realms, a thin thread of light dancing recklessly against the shadows. For while the shadows had been faced, the lingering whispers had yet to be truly exorcised, awaiting another crack to show its teeth once more. And in that understanding, the final line of dread echoed through the silence. They do not disappear. They linger.